Hi everyone. Thank you for joining the first session of the Supply Chain Leaders Webinars series. Today we have the chance to learn from the experience of HanesBrands, one of the leading clothing company in the world. Thank you to the speaker, Christophe Pecriaux, who is manager, Forecast Western Europe for the Intimate products. The presentation will last 30 minutes and will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A session. So please do not hesitate to post your questions throughout the webinar in the Q&A section of your screen. And now I'm going to hand it over to Christophe to start the presentation.
Good morning, everyone, and good evening for those who are far away from here. I'm very happy to share with you our experience by integrating a new business in a global supply chain. First of all, before starting on this very interesting topic, I just want to talk to you about myself. I started working in supply chain organization like 10 years ago, and I started with Mondelez International. So I guess you know this food company selling very tasty products like chocolate, coffee, biscuits, sweets. And here I just pick a few figures. Like in France, total sales is about 2.5 billion euros. And to do that, they only needed 10,000 SKUs. So it's quite a big number. Then I had the opportunity to really change with a new environment, with a textile environment, with DBApparel. And here you can see the figures are quite different. Like I say, in France, we are talking about 350 million euros. And to do that, they needed 20,000 SKUs. And just to share with you the complexity of this supply chain and the impact in the supply chain. For information, these 20,000 SKUs, they are changing, 30% of these SKUs are changing every 6 months. So it is typical to textile environments. Because as you can see, it is really complex supply chain to manage. And here in 2014, HanesBrands acquired DBApparel. This is today's topic. So today's agenda, I will first share with you, okay, HanesBrands, who we are, what are we doing, and what is our goal model. Then we will talk directly to how we acquired Europe by first where our challenges, and then how we created value out of it. And then I will really focus on the role of the forecasting process. So HanesBrands, we are a global apparel company. So by apparel, we mean underwears, bras, panties, boxers, but also some activewears. Today, our company is about $6 billion every year. As you can see, a lot of employees everywhere in the world. It is based in North Carolina in the US. As you can see, one of our strong advantage are our brands. These brands are very different from one country to the other. Like in France, the strong brand which is DIM or underwear product is one of our main brands. In some other country in Europe, we have Nodi in Germany, Abanderato, Lovable in Italy, and the rest of the world, Hanes, of course, for North America, champion. One key thing you have to understand with Hanes is that we are very concerned with our environmental and social impact from everywhere where we are in the world. We are tracking, of course, our energy and our environmental impact. We have a lot of program with education and social. One of our key advantage toward our competitors is our supply chain. You have to understand that in the textile environment, the way the supply chain are working is mainly an outsourced supply chain, meaning outsourcing to subcontractor. HanesBrands decided to insource the main part of its own production. As you can see, we are producing quite everywhere in the world, North and Central America, some in Europe, and of course some in Asia. As you can see, it means a lot of different manufacturing facilities everywhere in the world, and we are distributing also everywhere in the world. To support our business growth, we have, let's say, two main strategies. One is innovate to elevate, as you can see on the left part of the screen, with leveraging on big on the brand themselves in each market, innovation with innovation on the product, and leverage our own supply chain. Talking about our supply chain, again, it is one of our key advantage. We have 4 pillars to support the strategy. First pillar is about having big platform and leveraging this platform across the world. Secondly, have the same process for supply chain everywhere in the world. Third is to internalize production. As you can see, it is our key success factor. And finally, operate a local supply chain. This strategy, it is how we are using our goal model in order to grow our profit and sales. Now back to Hanes Europe acquisition, our challenges. So back in 2013, Hanes brand was mainly centered on North America business. If we look at the last 5 years, there was a lot of different acquisition. If we just look at the region, so really geographic acquisition, there were 2 main acquisitions. First one in 2014 with Hanes Europe, and the second one in 2016 with Hanes Australasia, the old Pacific brand. So how did you create value out of it? You have to understand that Hanes brand was actually, again, focused on North America. So the markets are very different from what we have in Europe. So North America, you know that it's about 3 countries, and actually the major part of the sales are made in the US. It is the same economic area, and actually with 2 common languages, and we know that everyone in this region are talking English. Whereas when you come in Europe, we are not that united as the US are, with 49 countries. As you can see, some countries are in the same economic region, but some are not. It means custom fees to manage, etc. A lot of different languages. If you look at the customers themselves, same, there is some change. Hanes was mainly selling in North America to mass market and Amazon, and actually mass market is mainly driven with 2 customers. Where in Europe, it is a bit different. Of course, there is mass market and internet pure player, but you have, of course, a lot of retail business, our own website, ad discounter, e-discounter, and we are also selling to other countries through our export agents. And one interesting thing for textile environment is that each country has different channel of trade with different behavior of consumer behavior. And finally, just looking at the volume, North America is selling 10 times more volume than we are selling in Europe. So in a nutshell, we have a supply chain that is, let's say, focused on North America and driven to get profit from North America. And they had to deal with the European business, which is a lot more complex. So how did we decide to create value out of it? We decided to use the gold model, which is a global supply chain, and to leverage from this global supply chain in order to create value. So we get back to our 4 pillars of the strategy, and we needed to adapt 2 things. One is organization, and second are the processes. If we look at the organization, I won't go into too much detail with that. But just taking the example of basics in Intimate product. So formally in the previous organization, the development was made mainly in Europe, like it is very common in the textile environment. Forecasting was made country per country, not sharing anything. Planning was done in Europe, and production was done in Asia, mainly outsourced production. It is very common supply chain strategy in the textile. Decision was to take the expertise where it was. Basically, for development, there is very specific intimate products, which are bras, for Europe. And the decision was to keep the expertise in Europe because it's a very specific need. Whereas for basics products, we are talking about men underwear, briefs, panties. Decision was to globalize with the US market. Forecasting point of view, I will come back to that later, but basically we decided to move from each country making their forecast to central and local forecasting process. Planning as well was changed. Some team were kept in Europe in order to translate forecasting to planning, and some other team were moved to Asia in order to plan and schedule the manufacturing units. And finally, production. Here we are coming to the last strategy, which is to in-source big runners inside our own plants and keep outsource low volume products. That is for the organization part. Process-wise, there is a lot of process that will change, but basically, decision was to keep local processes, which are very close to customer and market needs. As you can see, European markets are very specific compared to the US one, with fast fashion, product packaging adaptation. We have multiple countries and legal constraints. And on the other hand, you have the global supply chain, which has its own homemade tool. And they want to, again, we wanted to leverage from the supply chain, so they need to keep as well their own process and tools. So it was decided to work on the middle part of it, and the middle part of it is the forecasting process. Why is that? Because the forecasting process was the only process able to aggregate European needs and send the correct signal to the supply chain tools in order for them to produce and then supply the local needs. Let's go deeper into the forecasting process. How did we create value with it? Well, looking at the forecasting process, we need to work on 4 different parts of the process. First of all, we wanted to make our forecast more efficient. And when I'm talking about efficiency of the forecast, it means 2 things. Work on the accuracy of the forecast, this is the first thing we think about, but also work on the workload of it. Of course, forecast-wise, you can always spend a lot of time on the forecast in order to improve it, but actually we are in the real world and we have fixed people working on it. Other thing we had to work on was to work on the KPI in order to measure and to improve on our forecast. Third part is, of course, to answer the global supply chain requirements, meaning sending the correct signal to the supply chain tools. And finally, we had to be able to track our forecast commitment towards supply chain. And to do that, this is where we needed to have a tool that was able to adapt to all these different needs. Then we had to working on the efficiency of the forecast. One thing also you have to know, again, I won't go into the detail of the supply chain itself. There is 2 processes in order to make the supply chain work. First one is a make-to-stock strategy. Basically, for each SKU, we build a target of stock that the supply chain needs to achieve. And the second strategy is a make-to-order strategy. Basically, again, for each SKU, we send a signal of X of single units, and the supply chain is producing this single unit X weeks before the actual shipment to customer. This is 2 ways of producing in our global supply chain. On the other hand, we worked with our product portfolio locally. What it means? It means that on one hand, we had what we call the continuous product. These continuous products are regular products, very repetitive sales, meaning the same sales every year. This is usually where we have our blockbuster or big runners. And usually these products are shared across different countries. On the other hand, we have seasonal products, meaning products that only live for 6 months, maximum 1 year. Or promotion. These products are very customer oriented. It means basically the customer can decide whatever it wants because it's very textile oriented. It is very also depending to sales departments. Our decision between local and central forecasting was to decide that all continuous products would be forecasted centrally. It means forecasting at Western Europe level in order to gather all the needs, and to use statistical model in order to be more efficient. And of course, this product, we decided to use the make-to-stock strategy to our global supply chain. On the other end, all the other products that are very local product, or let's say dedicated product and very sensitive to customer selection, will be built at country level or customer level if needed. And here we will work on the process to have it very easy input inside the tool. And in supply chain point of view, this product will be produced with a make-to-order strategy. That's for the process. Of course, a process, in order to be working, needs to have an organization and a tool to support it. So we have the two processes, central and local process. First of all, our organization. We have the same suite with people working centrally, meaning only on this continuous product. We call them the statistical forecast planner. And on the other hand, we had other forecast planner that were working locally, meaning close to the sales department of each country, and we call them the event forecast planner. And the major part of it is that these two teams needed to communicate very regularly. So we have monthly meetings to align on the product portfolio split between the two teams, and of course, a regular communication by phone or whatever. Regarding the tool, again, this is where FutureMaster is was very important for us, because we needed to have an adaptive tool, a tool that was able to manage on one hand one process, which is a central one, with the modelization forecast, automatic updates, and the role of the statistical forecast planner was only to clean the historic data from shortages, special event, promotion, whatever. And in the same tool, we need to be able to work with the event forecast planning. And here we really work on having an easy manual input inside the tool. And we also work to have a specific promotion module by customer. This tool the objective of the tool was, of course, to be able to work these two processes, but also to have reporting in order to analyze our business, even if it's statistical or event, and also to project valuation. This tool is also used for KPI measures. This is basically how we do it. So in a nutshell, central and local forecasting process, an organization which is very similar with central team and local team, and a tool which has both process on one hand, and each part of the process can speak together with the reporting analyzers and KPIs. So we are still in the middle of the journey. We have still things to improve. Actually, there's still some countries to get inside this new process. And unfortunately, I can't share with you the Hanes Europe data or results. What I can tell you actually is that, first of all, Hanes Europe meets its operating profit objective. That's the first good point. And in the graph, you can see here it's a Wall Street data. So as you can see, during the last 5 years, the Hanes brand increased its net revenue and its operating profit by 40%. So basically, the operating profits increased as well as the revenue. So that being said, I just figured myself, okay, this is very Hanes or textile oriented. So if I have to share something with people working in very different environments, what was the key success factor in our journey? To me, the key success factor is to understand what is the goal model of the company and how to achieve this goal model. And question is not to change the goal model, the question is really to find what are the true local specificities that needs to be addressed inside this goal model. In our example, we had a European business that was very, very specific and different compared to the US one. The decision was to say, I will keep my goal model, my supply chain goal model, but I will adapt my tools in order to manage the local specificities inside this goal model. I will just finish my presentation with one figure, and I will just give you 30 seconds to think about it. Here it's a big number, so 1,000 765 billion euros. This is a huge number. So just think about it. What is this number about? That's a challenge. I will give you the answer right now. This is the total amount of merging and acquisition transaction only in Europe. This is a growing number compared to the previous year. So what I'm saying with that is merging and acquisition, they are always asking to create value out of it. And it means typically that supply chain organization need to create value out of it. So what we experience with Hanes Europe, actually everyone will experience it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Christophe, for this very interesting presentation. So we received many questions from the attendees. We're going to try to respond to as many as possible during this 15-minute Q&A. Let's look at the questions. So the first question we have, so forecasting process, how to manage the change with the new process, central forecast and local forecast.
Actually, this is one of the major, let's say, challenges we had during the implementation of this new process. We work on two main things, and actually the key success factor on that would be communication. Communication before the implementation of the project itself. Basically, it means that you work with all the end user, communicate with them what will be your future, and be as most specific as you can, because actually they are expert on their business. So you need to really communicate very clearly how you will work tomorrow, what will be the impact, what will be the change. That's the first part. And then communication with the other part, it means that after when the project is implementing, continue communicating with the end user and even with the local business team.
Okay, thank you. Now a more specific question. How is it done in Future Master? Do you have separate screens for Europe demand planners and the country demand planners?
So yes, there is a different screen that are very dedicated to each process. So the European demand planners, or it's our statistical forecast planners, they have their own screen with modelization screen, and they can look at the global volume and the volume per business unit, even per customer if they need. And on the other hand, the event forecast planner, which are the country demand planner, for them, actually, they have their own screen. One interesting thing is that reporting tools, they have both information. They have the central forecast information and the event forecast information. And the reporting helps each part of the demand planner to see, okay, what is the forecast on one hand, what is the forecast on the other hand.
Okay, thank you. So did you adjust Future Master existing solution to your new business model, or did you start from scratch?
We started from scratch. So before this process, we used Future Master for each country has its own Future Master. So we knew the tool. We knew what it was capable of. The decision was to say, we don't want it to change our way of making our forecast in Western Europe. So we decided to say, here is the central and local, and how Future Master will adapt to this new process. So basically, we started from scratch in Future Master, of course, with the help of the Future Master consultant, and we built our process.
Another question. So beyond the product segmentation, do you manage the forecasts by class of trade, by distribution channel?
That is a very fair question, because we also had this question when working with the local each country. We decided first for the continuous product, which are managed centrally, only to forecast at the highest level, which is the Western European level 1, and then to split business unit per business unit. For this product, we can't see the split between each class of trade. On the other hand, the other product which are very seasonal or the promotion one, here we had the need to have a look at each class of trade. So only for this product we are able to manage the forecast at class of trade. But here, this is where we are adapting. Some countries don't need to go to the class of trade level. Some countries need to go to this class of trade level. It's really depending. We have the ability to do both.
Okay, so you mentioned that you have a local and a central forecast. How do you reconciliate both approaches in FutureMaster?
We reconciliate in FutureMaster. So first of all, I talked about the reporting. So this is basically where you see the figures themselves. This is where you can analyze previous year, previous 2 year, current year, next year, etc. The other part where we reconciliate is when we project value, meaning we value our forecast from the volume of the forecast itself. And this is where for each business unit, we have to accumulate on one hand the continuous product, on the other hand, the seasonal and promotion. And actually, this is where you reconciliate the both approach in volume and value.
Okay. Do you have any cooperation with the finance department in order to reconciliate forecast planning done by supply with financial planning? And it's not finished. If yes, at which time bucket have you implemented this collaborative process? Quite long question.
Yeah, and I guess it's the same question for all business, because actually it's always a challenge to reconcile on one hand the forecasting projection, which is mainly done on volume and valuation on one hand, and on the other hand the financial projection, which is actually driving the business itself. We are reconciliating them. We have a monthly, what we call a sign-off process. It is a monthly meeting in each country. The board of each country is meeting to look at actually what is the forecast, what is the value of the forecast, and they are comparing it with the financial planning. And they can, if they need, adapt it. So it means if the financial planning is different from the forecasting in volume, they can adapt it or not, or actually can drive question. And yeah, and time buckets. So yeah, it's a monthly meeting we have.
Okay. So what are the, now it's a question regarding the results. So what are the concrete results of FutureMaster use and implementations in terms of forecast accuracy improvement, service level, and regional stock decrease impact?
Well, unfortunately, it's not only about forecasting, because the stock and service level can be impacted by other things than forecast. Regarding forecast accuracy, one interesting thing is that we had the same or better results regarding the continuous product. And one interesting thing is that before that, we had each country working on the forecast of the same product. And after that, we had only 1 or 2 people that were working centrally on the same product. And interesting is that if you look at the efficiency of the forecast itself, so forecast accuracy improved or was the same as before, but at the workload point of view, we had less people working on the forecast. So let's say this is the first benefit we had. We improved or actually had the same result as before, forecast accuracy point of view, but we needed only to spend less time on it. Regarding the other kind of product, actually, we didn't really change the way of making forecast because it was local and it keeps as local. So actually, we can't say that there was a benefit with this new process, because actually there is no real change on the forecast accuracy point.
Okay, thank you. So we were receiving many questions. So did you see an improvement of forecast accuracy since you set up separate processes to manage the forecasts, seasonal versus regular?
So it depends on the product, but yes, we saw some increase of forecast accuracy. And one interesting thing is that before that, the KPI we measured was country per country. And actually, we also noticed when implementing this project that the KPI measurement was kind of different from one country to the other. So one of the key thing we also get from this project is that we had the same way of measuring our KPI. But if we look at the countries that we are measuring the same way as we do today, actually, yes, the accuracy of the forecast improved on the regular, meaning on the continuous product. Again, on the seasonal, it's the same result as before.
Okay. Now a question about change management, I guess. It's, as you were more a European company, how did you manage the shift to an American culture?
Actually, that was not easy, to be very fair with that. I think one of the good things that the American management decided to do was to keep the some local management on board when they were integrating the European companies. So how do we manage it? Again, it's very common, but again, communication, I guess, was the key thing here. And I also, it's very personal experience I can share. We also had a very interesting training with people working on how, where the cultural impact in the communication. And this is how we learned that actually American culture are very different to European one. And we have to understand how they are thinking or working on themselves in order to adapt our communication. So we had a training also on that, and it was very helpful.
Okay. As you separate local and central tasks, who is now responsible for the forecast quality? So it's a question about the governance.
It is both central forecast planner and local forecast planner are responsible for it. I mean, central forecast planner, of course, they are working on statistical model. They are cleaning the historic. But again, they really need to have strong communication with local team in order to understand, okay, what is happening on your business? If you have shortages, why do you have new customers, things like that. So they really have to work together. Who is responsible for what? Again, so the continuous product, it is managed by central forecast planning, but the point is to understand what happened. So let's say the first responsibility would be central forecast planning, but with the help of the event forecast planner. Regarding the other kind of products, seasonal and promotion, here it's very clear. Central forecast planner can't do nothing about it, let's say. So it's very local responsibility.
Okay. We have a question here. What drives your business in terms of forecasting?
The forecasting is impacted by the sales itself. So sales in the textile environment is driven by the trends. Is the product good or not? It's driven by the customer selection, which is very important in our business. Again, as I said, with a single product, it can be blue or red. If the customer doesn't want the red, even if it's a very good color, he won't take the red. And that is something that is really driving our forecast. And this is the reason why we decided to be very close to sales department in order to manage this, let's say, customer oriented question. So I talk about the trend itself. And one of the key things that I didn't really share with you is in the textile environment, one of the major key things is our lead time. So main production for Europe, actually, in our example, is done in Asia. We have close to 6 to 7 months lead time. And our market is actually needs to have very dynamic response. So one of the key driver to our forecast accuracy or our business is actually to be able to forecast in advance very early compared to our lead time in order to answer all business. So let's say the key driver is customer selection, trends, meaning on the market, and our lead time, which is, let's say, very long. So we need to be able to forecast most accurately possible.
Okay, thank you. So in today's environment, operations tend to move away from make-to-order models. What is the difference at HanesBrands?
So again, there is two strategies. So you have the make-to-stock strategy and the make-to-order strategy. Make-to-stock strategy, you need to build, you need to have actually historic data, or actually a more sense of what will happen on the market itself. So to do that, you can only build make-to-stock strategy on projects that are continuous. Make-to-order strategy, actually, we are using for seasonal product. By definition, seasonal products don't have historic at all. So of course we can say, well, this new red product can have the same history as an old red product. But the truth is, if the customer doesn't want it, it won't work. So this is the reason why we said we can't have a make-to-stock strategy for seasonal product. We need to have a make-to-order strategy, because this is the only way to supply it. But on the other hand, we will use the make-to-stock strategy in order to lower our global stock approach.
Okay, thank you. How did you measure your out of stock percentage?
Actually, in a textile environment, some seasonal products, they are living for 6 months. So out of stock, let's say, we just have to look at the global amount of volume and value of stock at the end of the season to see what will be out of stock. So this is the first part. So basically, we just look at the figures. We also have some tools in the supply chain to project the stock. So basically, it's stock versus forecast, and we see what will be the end stock of the season. And one of the key things we also measure is the overstock of the regular product. So it means, on this case, that a regular product that is sold for the next at least 1 year, 2 years, so we have enough stock to cover the next few months. But if we decide to have commonly a target of stock of, I don't know, 3 months, if we are above it, we also measure it in order to decrease this stock.
Okay, thank you. So businesses including HanesBrands strategy, sorry, I don't understand the question. So HanesBrands strategy is to reduce stocks, meet customer demand, and add value to the business. How is this forecasting model adding value?
So how do we add value out of it? How to reduce stock in our business? The only way to reduce stock is, or you reduce your lead time, which is very hard when you are close to 6 months with a 2 months transfer delay, or you work on your forecast accuracy. And this project work on this part, on the forecast accuracy. We also wanted to work on the forecast efficiency, meaning the workload we spend on the forecast itself. So this is how we are trying to use this new forecast process in order to reduce the stock. How to meet customer demand? Well, in this case, it's more a question of developing products that are close to the market. So once it's done, so it's not a forecasting issue. Then the question is, okay, we need to be able to meet the customer far in advance, or to take, let's say, forecasting strategy in order to supply enough goods to supply the needs. But it is very complicated, that's for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to ask maybe the last two, 3 questions. So what kind of KPIs to measure the forecasting you used? What kind of KPIs?
So we use 4 KPIs. The two first KPI are very common KPI. It is the forecast accuracy and the BIAS. The forecast accuracy, sorry for the details, but it is basically looking at the forecast that was done for a specific month X months before that. Remember, in our process, we have a lead time close to 6 months. So it means we measure our forecast accuracy 6 months in advance. So we look at the forecast done 6 months in advance. That's for the, and same for the BI. Second thing, we built 2 new KPI, which are the rolling forecast accuracy and the rolling BIs. This KPI not only measure 6 months in advance, but it measures all the months from this forecast to the actual months we measure. So basically, if we have a 6 months lead time, it means that the accuracy is calculated on the last 6 months. We accumulate all the demand and we compare it with the forecast of the last 6 months.
Okay, thank you. So the last 2 questions. Could you specify what you call gold model and why?
To me, the gold model, it is what is the model of the company that make it a strategic advantage compared to its competitors. To me, it is one of the key things that is, let's say, driving the gold model. And why I'm talking about that is, in my previous experience in Mondelez International, I also experienced acquisition and merging, and I had the opportunity to talk with the supply chain director, and I asked him, okay, sometimes it worked, the acquisition worked well, and the team were, let's say, happy, no over sales or no shortage, and sometimes it didn't work. So what was the difference? We were in the same company. What was the difference? And the main difference was that on one hand, so when it worked, the gold model was very clear. The teams that were included in the new company understood the gold model and they just worked towards this gold model. And when it didn't work, it was because the gold model was not clear to the new teams. So this is why I wanted to emphasize on that, is that the gold model, I guess, to me, is very key to be able to find the correct way to manage a change.
Great. The last question now. So what are the next challenges, the next main projects in your supply chain transformation journey?
There are some, again, we are still in the middle of the journey. Forecasting wise, we still need to include new countries in this process. Not all countries are in this process. First, we have the major countries, but still other countries needs to be included in this process of the new forecasting process. Regarding supply chain, there is so much of other projects to have a supply chain that may be more dedicated to the European business, but not jeopardizing the global supply chain. So there is some project as well on this part.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Christophe, for your presentation today, and thank you to all the attendees for joining this first Supply Chain Leaders webinars. We're very much interested in having your feedback on this webinar, so please take a couple of minutes to fill in the evaluation survey that you will be receiving in a few minutes. The replay of the webinar will also be communicated to you this afternoon, so do not hesitate to share it with your colleagues. And last but not least, our next Supply Chain Leaders webinar will take place on the 10th of July, and we'll be focusing on Bonduelle, the global leader in ready-to-use vegetables. So Nathalie Morondière, the SNOP and methods manager at Bonduelle Europe Long Life, will be sharing the supply chain transformation journey of the company, of her company. So thank you again to everyone for joining today. Thank you, Christophe, very much. And this was really a very impressive, very pragmatic, very impressive business case. So thank you, and we wish you a very good day or a very good evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.